Hello, Karina, Kreia. You work for the Swedish company Kinnarps, which is a furniture manufacturing company and also a design company. So you work a lot on designing office space and workspaces. We partnered up for the Coworking Europe conference in Warsaw last year, and we had the opportunity really to learn from your expertise about how to figure out the layout of a workspace in a creative way nowadays, also with the experience you had with our friends from Brand Embassy. The idea of this conversation was really to see how you, as a professional of space layout, envisions the transitions towards what you called, or what we call, the safe office or the safe place, and also have an idea of where you see things going on the longer term. Is it just something we will have to deal with for the coming weeks, or do you see that we are definitely heading towards a new way to figure out what a flexible workspace should be and how it should operate? And when we say flexible, of course, it would likely be applicable for the all office world as we're speaking. So maybe I'll let you introduce yourself, and so we will have the conversation on those two times. So the most urgent measures to be taken and how you envision things on the longer run. And please, Karina, who are you? Let us know a little bit better.
Thank you very much for this introduction. Well, my name is Karina and I work for Kinnarps as a Next Office Concept Manager, which is in our language a workplace specialist. Next Office Concept is an original concept of Kinnarps, which basically addresses the future needs of our clients. And the future Next Office concept is the safe office concept, simply because of the situation we have now. We are coming out of a lockdown. This is moving slowly but surely in many European countries now, and for sure we would like to come back to the offices. We run a web survey with our partners, Polish Institute of a Workplace and Academy of Leon Koźmiński in Warsaw, and we've discovered that among nearly 400 survey responders, we got like 30% of them who are utterly happy with home office and another 30% who are utterly unhappy. So the split was pretty even. We had three tiers, one very happy with a new setup, one very unhappy, and of course the group in the middle, which really brings us to the conclusions that first, there will be a new dynamic between office and home office in the near future. And there will be very different needs for very different users that office space needs to fulfill. And also, as you mentioned, there is increasing pressure on the flexi space, and the flexi understood in a kind of traditional way, which is basically spaces like a co-working spaces or any other short-term lease spaces. But actually what I see only in recent weeks coming, a lot of regular tenants, kind of traditional tenants, are now referring to the flexi space. So I think this issue of co-works really dying because of the corona crisis, I don't believe it at all. I think it was a preliminary statement. I think we are going to see a research of the flex space, shared space, co-working space, provided that some key conditions are fulfilled. But basically, the dynamic is changing so dramatically that this is changing from 1 week to another. Okay. So please forgive me if my predictions that are good for, say, April, May 2020 might be outdated, say, in a month or 2 months' time.
So you already, from the contact you have and your survey, you already feel that regular companies are starting to see the flexible and co-working option blipping in their radar, saying, okay, that's something we have to consider on the longer term also for our own operations. You already feel that kind of feedback?
Yes, well, in a survey, we asked individual users, so we didn't ask companies, but at the same time, I have a lot of meetings, well, web meetings and discussions with office managers and HR managers, and they are now really deep into revision of their overheads and their constant costs. So, and basically, real estate has been always figuring really high. Well, office costs were always pretty high on that list. And in the light of a situation that we have it now, and obvious consequences are that flex concept will be on the rise, they are really asking themselves whether they should make their own current office a flex concept, sort of a flex. Let's call it properly because this is professional forum. Let's call it shared desking environment. So they think whether they should go into shared desking environment with their current office, or maybe in some cases, especially when the remaining lease term is short, they really play with an idea of dropping that space entirely and going into a genuine flex concept, simply because they know that the historical office space is really difficult to sustain in a foreseeable future.
Yeah. Interesting that you already see and get those feedbacks from the office managers and people, because that's something we have been prognosing for so much time, and now it's like happening also because due to the circumstances, but also that's something you see now happening, and those questions are now on the agenda of those players.
And the surprising things is that you're saying that, yes, the all co-working environment, all co-working society, also professional workplace society, we were talking for a long time. We were promoting flexibility, sharing, a new culture of work. And there were a lot of people who are really, really reluctant. And the fascinating thing is that those people who are the most reluctant, now they're really turning their dice. I mean, there is a deep change in attitudes, because it's obvious that you hear it from the co-working community, from us, from specialists. But what is really surprising, that message comes from the very traditional typical environments now, and this is a big shift.
Yeah. Interesting, super interesting. So now regarding the, a growing number of spaces are reopening now. Of course, we hear about the sanitizers. Some of the spaces are taking the body temperature of their tenants. Some others try just to limit the distance between the people. So what are your recommendations? So you made an analysis of what would be needed. I will share some of your proposals and ideas.
Please do, Jean-Yves. So if you go exactly to this slide, well, first of all, what I would like to stress at the beginning of this discussion, we are dealing here with not a kind of binary situation like lockdown and return to the office. We are strongly convinced that we'll have 3 phases in this process at least. So the lockdown, compulsory home office as we have it now since the beginning of March or middle of March, depends on European country. This is the phase that is now coming to the end, and we are entering the new phase. But this new phase is by no means return to the historical office, because we are going to live in a condition of the social distancing and all the regimes resulting from the virus. We are going to live with this as long as the virus is with us, and the virus is going to be with us as long as we are not immune towards it. And of course, there are different attitudes to this. I am in the field, in this group that believes in a vaccination. So I believe that we wait for a common vaccine. And the story around vaccination is that, well, European Union did a huge money charity collection the last week just to set up the basic research for this immunity to come through. So we are really at the very beginning of that phase. It's so difficult to say how long it will last, but we know it's counted not in weeks, it's counted in months or even in years. Hopefully not too many years, but I think it's quite realistic to say that we are now in the safe office concept, in this new reality. We are for as long as from 12 months to 24 months, hopefully not longer, but let's see. So this is going to be quite a substantial piece of time, mid-term prognosis that we think is upon us, and mid-term reality that is upon us, and we need to change to this. So first of all, home office or remote work has really changed the last couple of weeks. We had compulsory home office, and it became really kind of compulsory in most of European economies. And now home office is going to prevail for a long time, but more like a systemic solution. It's been kind of, actionable. It's kind of very quick shift towards home office. And it happened sort of without real structure for so many of our clients. I mean, some companies were very prepared for home office, for remote work. Some others, they just jumped into that water. They made a leap of faith out of nothing overnight.
Yeah.
So you hear the stories like people working on a desktop, being given laptops overnight, or people really not having any type of conditions to work from home, now working from home. I could elaborate on that for long, how people are working in Poland. You can find a lot of crazy pictures on social media these days. When returning to office, when you start to analyze it and you start to dissect it into different types of challenges, obviously there are challenges that are very closely related to the office building and office space itself. But also it turns out that just a journey to work is a challenge in itself. For example, in Poland, we have a regulation now that public transport can carry only half of the passengers that take sitting places. And of course, sitting places were not all the places in the buses and trams and trains. So the overall capacity of that system has decreased by 2/3 or even more. Imagine all the people trying to come back to work. There is physically no way they could reach the city centers of the big cities today. And also we had a defreezing of shopping centers. And what really happened is that the shopping centers set up a new regulation that only every other parking lot can be taken by a car. So if you go with the same rule for office buildings, and office buildings have never had too many parking spaces, this is again decreasing the possibility to get to the office building by car. We don't know it yet. This is like happening. This is a process in making, but we know that the journey to work will be a new challenge for many, many users. And it's going to be a challenge as it was never before. So simply, some people won't be able to reach their office. Even they would like to reach it simply because they don't have a good conditions to work at home. Home office becomes kind of a critical part of this equation. But home office penetration before the crisis in Poland was roughly 5%. You have a different information here.
Okay.
Yes, because companies are claiming quite rightly that they were allowing, 70% of the companies are claiming that they were allowing some type of home office. But please keep in mind that very often that was just a benefit, kind of a benefit for a worker, when sort of nobody really cared about it, nobody really measured a day in a month you could home office. Those companies also count into the 70% slot of the companies who did implement some kind of co-working in the past. When you work with Eurostat data, and the latest available set of data is for 2018, but this is a very slow process. Well, it has been a very slow process in the past. Now it's kind of dramatically fast. So in Eurostat data for 2018, there was less than 5% of employees in Poland who had a structured home working practice. So we've moved from less than 5% to the current estimate of 80% of people working from home. And that happened overnight because we had this, the 13th of March was sort of the last working day in the office. And there was a weekend. And after the weekend, on the 16th of March, there was a lockdown and nobody went to the office. So it's quite justified to call it an overnight shift.
Yeah.
We are dealing with this situation now. We have a home office now, but it doesn't work for everyone. It does work only for some people. And we know that, we know that office is needed, and we know that many people want to come back to the office. If you go the other way with my slides, you will see that we are saying that there are key areas to address for office managers and also for community managers in a co-working environment, for all those who plan safe return to the office. And those plans are now being set up because I've been discussing with several bodies that emergency structures that companies have built, some kind of crisis management teams that are really into coming back to the offices. And one would think that the pressure comes from top management. Of course it does. Top management is quite determined to get people on board to the office space, but it also comes from employees. We want to be in the office for so many different reasons. I'm not going to tackle it now, but there's a lot of things related to infrastructure, but also knowledge transfer. This whole journey, if you stay on this one for a second, this whole journey to the safe office, when already we are in a building, we are putting aside the journey to the office, we are putting aside the home office for a moment. Just the physical journey through the building structure to the office space, to the unit space, poses some challenges. And if you think about the building structure and the transportation that needs to be provided, now there is a time to discuss with landlords really the physicality of that process, how to enter the building, how to get to the lift, how to get on the stairs, possibly how to not touch any object. So we are thinking about touchless or contactless environment in those common spaces. But most importantly, also how to deal with those safety and, for example, fire drill procedures, how to evacuate a high tower in the condition of social distancing without breaching those social distancing rules. So there's a lot of things that should be discussed by the tenant with the landlords when it comes to the new procedures audit in a building. Another thing is the building infrastructure. We would love to have high quality partitions filters, HEPA filters. We would love to have them in the office building. So kind of a medical standards cleaning procedures. Well, from what we know now, this is quite unfeasible. Most of the buildings won't be able to install such a new filters simply because all the infrastructure wasn't designed for this. We can't go that far with the building. We could do with that on a tenant level, on a space level, but with the building, of course, we can make them as a tenant, as the clients, we can make the landlords to increase the exchange of air, to make them run the infrastructure throughout the week and the weekend, not to stop it. This is a typical rule, or kind of a saving rule for many office buildings, that basically when the people are not there, when the users are not there, they just shut the building down. And this is not the way to deal now. And more importantly, it's also critical to know with whom you share this infrastructure, because you might behave in a perfect way on your 3rd floor, and then you share the air infrastructure with somebody on the 5th floor who doesn't care. Yeah. And so what then? Or for example, you need to get a feedback if something happens in such a case on a 5th floor. You should be informed as a tenant on the 3rd floor that there was an incident that might impact you as well. So completely new procedures.
And that's even worse if you are in a co-working space and it's not the guy who is upstairs or downstairs who might have weird behaviors, but the guy next to your door that you don't know and with whom you are interacting due to the way the space is organized, but who complies with rules which are their homes regarding their own organizations. And indeed, it makes it harder even for the co-working space. Might be even more important for them to set the right set of rules according to that.
And Jean-Yves, you're striking in a very important chord, because we are seeing a very different risk profiles, not only on the users level. The users are very different. Some people really, I will come back to that in the later part, but we can see a very different risk profiles on a corporate level. So we see corporate who are really serious, really strict about what happens and the social distancing. And well, believe me, they are mostly American companies these days. I'm not surprised with this. And there are companies like, maybe, let's be honest, Swedish, Scandinavian companies that are really kind of far more laid back, far more relaxed, because they think, well, social distancing, what's the surprise? We did it all the time. These famous pictures of the Finnish queuing lines when people staying 5 meters from each other. That's a queue, right?
Yeah.
So this attitude really different depending on where the headquarter of a company is located and how their particular market has been stricken by the crisis. So imagine people from the north of Europe and imagine people from the south of Europe, where the south was really, really stricken. And you might end up in a co-working community with the people working for those companies really being obliged to follow very different rules. A very simple example, some people going in with the masks in the office space because they work for a Spanish company, and this is a regulation now in Spain that you stay in your mask, so whenever they want to interact with somebody even remotely. And then you have somebody, well, from different part of Europe, even from Poland, we don't wear the masks inside.
Germany, the Nordic, Benelux, the mask is recommended but not compulsory.
Yes, we are obliged to use masks when we go outside to the public space, but not inside when we are in a social space and closed social space. We have to wear masks in shops, in many other public spaces, but not in the offices. So this kind of things, they might seem to be trivial, but if they're left behind like that, and let's say it's going to last for not for a couple of months, it is going to last for many months or maybe a couple of years, this is going to be aggravated over time. So when you go to the next slide, well, maybe next one is about hygiene, and we've tackled a bit of that. And I think hygiene issues are the most important, but in a way they are the most straightforward. So there is not a big issue here. There is not much of a misunderstanding here. That we all know that we need to follow some procedures. We need to clean our hands. We need to clean our desks, and we expect additional cleaning services and regimes from ourselves, from the users of a space, and also from the cleaning services. So that's pretty obvious. We also expect that extra air cleaners and UVC filters will be put into the space just to sanitize it more often than in the past. There is a great sensitivity towards it. In the past, the air wasn't that important. Now, air is critical.
Yeah, exactly. And it depends also, as you mentioned, that how new the building is, because of course there was a lot of, especially in Poland, where you had so many new buildings and skyscrapers, where you had new co-working brands recently entered and took over the part of the building. But in a big deal of the European countries, we see co-working space who have been around for 5, 6, 7 years, and in older buildings, and where indeed the techniques is maybe not as up to date as it is in some other areas, and it makes it even harder from that perspective. If you are having tenants which work for US companies, for instance, who need to provide with some guarantees, they won't be able to provide at the end of the day.
Yes, and there is a lot of new areas of discussions between tenants and landlords. Yes, you're exactly right at this point. So I was quite surprised, well, in a way surprised and in a way not surprised. The first wave of discussion between tenants and landlords, it went strictly towards the bottom line. They were all the tenants were discussing the rents. That happened, well, in Central and Eastern Europe, but across Europe as well. Whereas, to be honest, this discussion should go into safety and procedures, in my view. I think there was a bit of the feeling of a false start in this discussion. This shouldn't be that much stress on rental levels as it should be on continuing with the business and providing adequate conditions for that business.
For the resuming of the activity at the end, that we're
exactly
dealing with the cash drain right now, and not so much with the cash drain that could come from the fact that they would not be ready to reopen within a couple of months, for instance.
Well, exactly, and we should now fight for reopening of the economy and reopening of office spaces, co-working spaces, because this is critical, to reopen it and to reopen it in a safe way to avoid any kind of troubles in the future. Because I think we all have seen this famous case coming from Seoul, like the call center, when 43% of one floor got infected just through physical proximity. We don't want to have such cases in Europe. I think that would be a disaster. So the key idea now is to avoid this kind of situations to happen, and we should act toward this and make whatever possible to avoid this kind of situation. So, and the critical thing to really to do it, really this thing to happen is to impact office culture. And here's one thing about social distancing. We have a huge issue with social distancing. I mean, staying 2 meters apart is such an unnatural feature. This is not in our blood. And again, we have Scandinavians for whom this is quite a comfortable distance, but we have south and west of Europe, and where this is so difficult to sustain. So the big trouble is to have people who know the rules. They know it, with their mind, but they don't feel it with their heart, because this is not what they've learned throughout their lifetime. And there is also another mental mechanism that in a time of a danger, in a time of a trouble, we want to get together. We would like to reunite. And well, this is exactly what we can't do now. So there is such a huge discord between what we would like to do through our emotions, through our kind of gut feeling. This is discord with what we need to do, knowing that there are those rules. And that will be incredibly difficult to keep in a social environment when we deal with the people whom we know, whom we like, whom we support, on whom we rely. It's so difficult to keep away from our friends, basically, and our coworkers. And there will be a huge issue on how to do it in the office space properly, because I can imagine that people are coming back to the office and for 2 weeks they are behaving accordingly to the new regime. But I can also imagine that after some times, with the coming relaxation, with a feeling of a comfort, people will fall into the old habits. And this is exactly what we can't do. Unfortunately, we can't do it for a long time. So the big thing is how to keep the people separate while keeping them together.
And learn some habits, as you said, and cultural gimmick that we all have. We were speaking with our friends in Spain, and they were really worried because indeed in Spain, contacts were, as you made the difference between the people in the Nordics, for whom it's something just usual to keep the distance. But we have definitely to deal with those the cultural differences that might lead to a different way to handle the reopening of the spaces, as you mentioned.
Yes. Imagine no kissing in Spain and Italy, not at all.
Or France or Belgium.
Or France, yes. We are not such a big kissers here, so it will be easier in Central and Eastern Europe. But for you guys, this is going to be difficult. And then when we go exactly to the office layout, we think this is the time to reorganize the office. And we see actually 3 approaches to safe return to the office. There zero approach. So people say, no, we are not returning to the office under these conditions. I think they will lose their attitude over the time, because they will understand that this is a mid-term standard. There is another attitude, like people saying, well, this is not going to last that long. So we just keep what we have. We just set up a new cultural regime, working in shifts. And we will try to survive in this new shift kind of model without any changes to the space. We just try to change the behavior sufficiently to survive. And there is the third attitude that is more comprehensive and playing a bit longer game, like people saying, well, we know it's going to stay with us for midterm. We need to change the space as well to provide users with the best possible conditions to adapt to this new situation. And well, you can easily imagine that I'm most closely with the third camp. Because when we go into our case study, we can just go that we did a case study, me and architect from Kinnarps, Anna Banak, we did it together. We did a study of an office space that is a pretty dense office space example in Poland, say 900 square meters, say 130 workstations. And this density is too much for many markets, and for other markets, this is totally understood. And I know that some co-working concepts also operate on a very high density level. So what we did this kind of model layout of 900 square meters, 130 workstations, and we did two options with it. First was, without any changes to the furniture, we've tried to map the workstations that are still usable according to the social distancing rules. Yes, and that's this. And please bear in mind that the social distancing in Poland, well, workstation distancing in Poland has been set up on 1.5 meters. So this is not even 2 meters. This is only 1.5 meters. And this slide shows what happens when we would like to leave all the furniture as it is and just make users to work in a safe way. Well, simply when you see the red chairs or the red tables, simply some places are unusable because they can't be reached in a safe way when other places around are taken. And the result of this exercise shows that the capacity of such office decreases to below 40%. So out of 130 workstations, we now have only 47, say 50 safe workstations.
On the other hand, you were mentioning that people couldn't commute due to the fact that the capacity of the transportation would be reduced.
Exactly.
So to some extent, yeah, it could match with also the reality of the low density made available by those other rules outside.
Or even if they reach the building, if it's let's say this is a unit in a high tower, they might not be able to get to the floor on time because the capacity of lifts, it has been reduced from 8 to 12 people to 4 people now. So we have all the limitation on the way to the office, and also the office really changes its capacity. But a key message here is that you get 40% of the original capacity if you don't change the furniture. This 40% is just indicative. This could be a little bit more, a little bit less, depends on the layout as it was. So what we did in the next options, and when you go to the, well, model 3, we did adapt that space, the optimum capacity, with all the social distancing rules. And again, remember this, the social distancing applied here is 1.5 distance between workstations and 2 meters distance in all other social situations. And of course, the density of a meeting rooms is also different. The density of kitchen or kind of usability of kitchen is dramatically different. And this is also the big question, how we eat in the office once we are in the office now. But what happens to the workstation is there is a slightly more of a workstation. Say roughly 50% of the workstations could be saved for this very dense example. And this figure will be different for different offices. What is also important, if you look at this layout, you see a very densified environment, really kind of a spacey environment. And we think that there is a huge psychological advantage of having an office that is, well, so loose and that allows to, well, all to use any of the seats. There is no limitation of a seats usage in such a concept. And it's also has no issue with the social distancing if all the spaces are taken. In comparison to the previous example, when you keep the desks and, oh my God, you keep the chairs, you really sort of, you encourage people to sit down whenever. And it's really difficult to, again, I'm talking about this mental shift from really strict following of the regime towards kind of more looser over time, because we know it's going to take a long time, it's going to last. So when you take out those desks, you end up with a setup that is safe throughout the life of this safe office concept.
It's counterintuitive for a furniture company to say that, isn't it?
Well, that we are taking desks. Well, in a way, to be honest, our business does change a lot. We know it does change a lot, but there's a big question. If you leave roughly half of a desk, what you do with this other half? And we know that, for example, a lot of people are suffering with a home office. So one of the answers is just to support your people in the home office and borrow them the furniture to their local places.
That some of our partners, for instance, Stardock in the Netherlands, for instance, they shipped the furniture to the tenants' home office, the members' home office. That was one of the kind of service they, as you say, you mentioned it. It's true that those things have taken place, actually. Yeah.
Exactly, and this happens to us. We have requests like that for the logistics service to help our clients to do it. And you know, there is this other big Swedish furniture company who is, well, I'm not mentioning the name because this is obviously a competitor, who is now selling the full set home office equipment to the companies with a shipment to the local, to the
Oh,
private
really?
houses.
The one with the four letters.
Yeah, and yeah, this is kind of
Okay.
yellow blue one. Yeah, you probably don't know it, but anyway, there is
No,
a company like that,
rings no bell.
and so they're doing this. The companies are purchasing furniture just to help the employees to set up in this new environment, because again, this is going to stay with us for longer. And
Mhm,
if the
mhm.
capacity of transportation decreases, if the capacity of office decreases, well, boy, there is no option just to stay home office for foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Not going to be compulsory home office as it is now in the lockdown, but this is going to be still a part of the system and a much more prominent part of the system than it ever was.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
This
Whereas
is
the other
comparison
three,
means.
yeah, the three comparison. So one expectation we see also in the co-working world of, is it a hope, is it an expectation, is it an assumption, we don't know, but that indeed there will be a shortage of co-working capacity, especially in the suburbs and the countryside, for this reason, that indeed home office will be lasting. It's structural shift which is taking place. But on the other hand, yes, you might have a big home if you are fortunate enough, but it's not the situation for everybody. And on the other hand, you need the split between your work life and your private life. And then
Yes.
you come with the third option, which is indeed this service-like workspace, and especially with smaller surface. But if we connect with what you were mentioning, this could be also something that would influence the way we figure out, we convert some existing building in those areas into that kind of service, isn't it?
Yes, yes, definitely. There will be much more empty units now in the shopping centers, in other commercial buildings to turn them into co-working spaces. With regards to the co-works, there is one thing that is at the core of a problem. The co-working market takes the squeeze between landlords' markets and the occupiers' needs, because landlords, they really charge you for the square meters, and
Mm,
the tenants or occupiers or users, they are buying the subscription per
mm,
person.
mm,
So
mm,
you are squeezed exactly in this conflict of a square meters towards the usage.
mm.
And the historical answer for that was to densify,
Yeah.
because the more users you can get per square meter, the better project efficiency. Whereas now you can't get that many people into the small space. So instead of 7, 8, 10 square meters per person, you need around 14, 15, maybe 17 square meters per person. And this is the core of a problem, of a financial problem that is going, might hit co-working environment. People will be expecting you to keep the same prices, not to raise your prices due to the increase of a space, whereas you will need more space to provide the same kind of service. And this is
Yeah.
difficult to answer.
Yes, we had the discussion with one of your compatriots, with Adam from JLL in Warsaw, a couple of weeks ago. He was saying that indeed, due to the fact that densification would lower, it means the prices asked by providers should be increased for that reason. That you unless your lease contracts propose you to lower the price of the lease, which is unlikely, or we don't know, but probably it won't happen. The alternative is indeed to increase your price per square meter of usage. Would it be for to book your meeting room, or to use your hot desk, or to book your offices? We all heard about those examples with WeWork, who used to pack a lot of people in small offices in order to release surface for the common areas so that people could really enjoy the lounges and everything. But while they were productive, they were just together in a small space. And it is it's challenging. The current time is very much challenging what was the model at the time. So will it mean that we will have less coaches and less catering area or cafes areas in those co-working space in order to give more room for the private office? That's indeed the question.
That's one of the options, but I also believe that people are using Cowork simply for this integration for the vibe. And you can still have a vibe, just you need a more space for that.
Yeah,
you can't have a meeting of 2 people in a 4 square meters room. You need 6 square meters or 8 square meters for them to keep the safe distance. So I think people will be coming to co-working spaces for communal experience, because many of us, we have enough of home office already after 2 months, but simply it needs to be organized in a different way. But also I think there is a lot of new options looming on the horizons, basically related to the major crash in the retail market. I mean, there is so many retail spaces that are going to be available in a couple of months, that a co-working tenants, should there be any demand, they could try to enter. And those spaces, they might also come from the public sector that is very supportive. In many of our cities, European cities, public sector is a big owner of a retail units, and they might be now really reconsidering the strategy, and they might be helping concepts that are now viable. So I think the one thing is to deal with existing concept that probably needs to be densified. But then I wouldn't limit yourself to just this. I would grab those empty retail units that are now going to be available for a long time.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Good. I think we covered quite a good deal of topics here. Is there something you want to add? Or yes, yeah, I had one additional question. It was about coming back to the furniture chapter. We see more and more of those pods and phone booths all over the place. How do you see that's evolve in terms of demand? Because those are elements that we have seen around for a while now, and I'm always amazed that we see that a lot in co-working space, but actually that's something which would be definitely needed in way more open space, office open space that we see around. What's your take on that, for instance?
Well, I think I'm discussing with many specialists, and once we come with a solution, how effectively to disinfect them after almost every single usage, they will be back into the game. But for the time being, when we are not able to provide adequate safety, and most of my clients, what they do is just they cut them off from the system. So they might be there, the phone booths, the small rooms, but simply without the efficient way of cleaning, they are kind of a tricky for many of us. Saying that, we are learning more and more about the virus, and we are starting to understand that maybe the air itself is not such a big danger. I'm over my head now a bit. I'm not, just please don't take it as an advice, but we are learning that we are learning the exact dangers. So we might be more convinced, and we might be more convincing in using such a small spaces in a couple of weeks when we learn more. For the time being, the best advice is that for the teams that work in a shift, because we see a lot of people working in a shift, just businesses split in two, and what shift coming, say 1 week, another shift coming another week, the process of disinfection in a between helps a lot. Helps a lot, but then you can't really run it in a normal business hours, because that makes this typology unviable. We have to change a lot, and there is a saying about the furniture supply. We are really not complaining, because there is a demand for kind of furniture we're not prime sellers for us, like for example screens or any type of or partitioning that helps users to isolate for another user.
Oh yeah, it's another thing. Yeah.
So we are developing this kind of solution. If you would like to discuss it in a couple of weeks, I will be able to present you with exact setups of the workstations, how they should be done to provide the highest possible level of safety. We are now working on that, really to be precise for office managers, for community managers, to help all of you really to set up a good and safe environment in your space.
Perfect. Brilliant. That was a very good, insightful discussion to be followed for sure. Yes, let's see. A lot of challenges are ahead of us, but yeah,
interesting times we have.
Yeah, that's always the thing. You know, at time of never waste a good crisis. Of course, we would like to have less people who are sick and ill and everything, but. Sure, that's and we see as you said as a catalyst for a lot of shift which were in the making, but you know we're facing some resistance here and there, and now we all of a sudden we see that's the obvious way to go. So some say that we are
yes,
yeah,
I've spent so many
hours.
Yes,
We are now entering really the 21st century, and I believe
that's my belief. That's my strong belief. Believe me, in my career as a workplace advisor, I've spent so many hours just convincing people to go remote.
Yeah.
Now this discussion is finally over, and this is one of the biggest, successes of my last weeks.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Karina, for the great discussion, and let's take some news soon. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Speak to you. Bye.